My kid is prone to big reactions when he gets hurt. And he loves biking, skateboarding, scootering, and all of those very athletic, high-impact sports, which means he gets hurt a lot. It's scary to get hurt. I mean, that first moment when you're hit with that wave of shock and pain, it can be so difficult to figure out, how hurt am I really? When he would fall off his bike and scrape his knee, his most common response would be to scream and then race over and pick up his bike and throw it as far as he could. I get the impulse, right? If I stub my toe, I want to go and kick whatever stubbed me. So I developed this response as a parent that every time I heard the scream, I would race over and remove any object that might get thrown, and then attend to the pain. Even the smallest injuries would have those big reactions. Now, last year, as school was wrapping up, after an amazing day at Summer Olympics, my son jumped on his scooter and proceeded to show me a trick he'd been working on for some time. He crouched down, he jumped up, he spun the scooter around himself somehow, and as he was coming down to land, he slipped a little, his foot tumbling to the ground, and I heard that telltale scream. I rushed over, moved the scooter away, and tried to calm him down. "I think it's broken. It's probably broken. Just take me home." I said, "Okay, let's take a deep breath." Never is really helpful, right, when someone tells you to take a deep breath in that moment, but I still did it. Habit. Now, I think I've heard him say that he's broken a bone maybe 100 times, and it's never been the case. I tried to be responsive, but I mostly kind of dismissed it. It can't be broken because it's almost summer vacation. I deployed everything in my dad tool belt: popsicles, TV, elevation, distractions, hoping to dissipate this until we could just move on. In the Bible story that we just heard, we heard Elijah responding to someone's confession of their pain and their grief. How I responded to my son was equal parts minimizing and denying. Now imagine if Elijah had responded to the widow in the ways that sometimes we respond to people's confessions and pain. I mean, here she is saying, "I am about to die. I have nothing in my life." What if Elijah had responded, "That really bums me out to hear that." Or maybe, "I know just how you feel. Let me tell you a little bit about what's going on for me. Here I am, trying to do this whole prophet thing. God sends me from place to place. I can't figure out what to do. I feel close to death too." Or maybe he would do what we do sometimes. We try to make it their fault. I mean, what if Elijah would have said, "Have you tried not being hungry?" Or maybe shifted the blame, thinking, "Maybe you wasted all your food." Or maybe that minimizing, that it can't be that bad. You're probably blowing this out of proportion. But instead, Elijah meets her kind of confession and her pain and her almost resignation to her fate by saying, "Don't be afraid." Saying, in a sense, "I see you. I believe you." But it's not the end of the story. Rachel Naomi Remen, who is a medical doctor who has spent most of her life at the bedsides of the dead, those who are dying, wrote, "I suspect the most basic and powerful way to connect to another person is to listen. Just listen. Perhaps the most important thing we ever give to each other is our attention. When people are talking, there's no need to do anything but to receive them, especially if you receive them into your hearts. Just take them in. Listen to what they are saying. Care about it. More times than not, caring is more important than understanding. Most of us don't value ourselves or our love enough to know this. It has taken me a long time to believe in the power of simply saying, "I'm so sorry," when someone is in pain, and meaning it. When we are carrying grief and pain, the worst thing is to be met with someone who says some version of, "I don't believe you," or "can't be that bad." Grief and pain are not meant to be carried alone. They cannot be corralled into neat and orderly timetables. We cannot predict in a linear way what stage is next. Grief and pain is messy. And it is in that mess that we need to be the people for each other that say, "I'm here with you. I see you. I believe you. I believe you that it hurts. I believe you that you don't know what to do next. I believe you that you feel deeply distraught." But we also need each other's help to be able to name for ourselves sometimes that we are experiencing, that what we are experiencing is actually grief. Because grief is a master of disguise. It puts on many masks. I want to tell you a little bit about my congregation's process of moving through some grief some time ago. In 2017, I had just been on staff for about 6 months when we had learned that our music director at the time had been engaging in multiple sexual relationships with members of the choir simultaneously, unknown to any of them, and against the professional guidelines of our church and our music professionals. When we learned about this, when someone came forward and said, "This is happening to me," we felt like we had to tell the truth about it. And so I remember we gathered the congregation together for a meeting that I always describe as pitchforky, in which we told the truth. I remember sitting in the meeting, hearing a small minority of the congregation, a vocal one, saying things like, "This can't be true, because he was never that way with me. He was so kind, I can't imagine him doing that." Or maybe that he was set up, that the women consented and are probably just trying to get revenge. They probably seduced him. Probably wasn't that bad. Or one that I heard specifically from an older generation of women, which I think could only come from the calcification of the grief of sexism, which was, "Back in my day, we had to deal with so much worse." In this meeting, I heard all of this pain, all of these accusations, and I knew that sitting in our sanctuary were some of the victims that were directly impacted. I knew that they were hearing their friends and fellow church members say these things about them, dismissing their grief and pain, dismissing the power it took for them to step forward and say this happened. I worried it would eat away at their resolve to be true to what was true to themselves. But most of all, I felt a deep sadness that their spiritual home, in their sanctuary that should be a place of healing, they were hearing people speak as if they were hysterical. As I look back on that meeting, I hear a voice within me whisper, "Do you see how their grief wears the mask of anger? Do you see how the pain of the revelations prompted a reflex of denial? Do you see how their grief is so human? There was so much grief that we were wading through. The grief of having to reevaluate the stature of someone you respected, the grief of being associated with a community where something like that could happen, the grief of being part of a community that would tell the truth, which is not something most of us have any experience with. The grief of embarrassment, the fear for the future. There was so much grief. People fractured into different sides. And yet, what needed to be heard for all, no matter their perspective on the matter, was simple. It was for someone to take in their grief and say, I see you, I believe you, that even if I don't understand or even if I don't agree, I see your grief, and I believe that it is real. This is especially true when our grief surrounds a trusted person or an institution of trust, when our faith is shaken. Because when a leader crosses a line, it doesn't just impact those directly impacted, it impacts every part of the institution. It causes everyone who participates to feel betrayed by the act in a way that is subconscious. When a trusted person does that so human thing and missteps, it breaks a sacred covenant, a promise, and the consequence can shatter our sense of safety. And the grief of that is like a virus. It moves through a community, causing people to take sides, putting on armor to harden their hearts, instead of what was needed was just to receive each other's stories. I see you, I believe you, even if I don't understand your perspective, even if I disagree with what you think, I see you, I believe you. We needed the sunlight of truth-telling. And I don't mean a simple narrative, but a story as complex, as multi-layered as it is to be human, where parts don't always align, where we can't always figure out exactly what's going on, but that we all contribute our parts of the truth so that we may find a mosaic of understanding. It was clear early on, as our community was sitting with this grief, that we needed to figure out a way to move through this in a way that would not fracture our community. And so for us, we made a decision early on. It was a commitment of the leaders and the ministry. We said that you could be a part of our community if you agreed with how we handled the situation of disclosing and terminating his position. And you could be a part of our community if you disagreed with how we handled this situation. That there was an expansiveness here that said that all feelings were welcome. But there was a boundary line, that no matter your opinion, you must be willing to treat those who differ from you with dignity and respect. And that meant no denying another person's experience and no accusing another person of a secret agenda. I can't say I see you, I believe you, if I deny that your experience is true. We spent a lot of time checking in with each other and ourselves, helping to name the parts of the situation that were painful for us, attempting to trade accusations for those pesky I statements everyone's always talking about. We made lists of our reactions, classifying them as feelings or thoughts, facts or opinions, speculations or fantasies. It was some of the most challenging work I've ever done And yet, when I look back on the whole experience, it is one of the parts of my ministry that I am deeply proud of, because we said that all grief was welcome at God's table, and that we committed to each other, to telling our truths. Grief, especially during conflict, becomes calcified into righteousness. It becomes unlistening, unwilling to be changed by what it might hear. We need to practice saying to each other, I see you, I believe you, even if I don't understand or agree with you. But the thing about doing this, about telling our truths and receiving each other's, is that most of us have no practice doing this. Right? It's hard to receive someone's truth that we don't understand, that we don't agree with. It's hard to receive someone's truth if we don't want what they're saying to be true. And yet I know each of you has had a moment in your life where someone opened the door and offered your soul a deep hospitality, when you felt no judgment, no fear, that you could say anything. You know what it feels like to be gifted being seen, being believed, being tended to. Too often we skip over the tending, the seeing, the believing, the feeling, the wrestling, the hearing, the unlearning, the relearning, because we want to get to the end of the story where we figured it all out. But if I've learned anything about this life, it's in the mess and the muck where life happens. And when we do, when we offer that deep gift of hospitality to each other, like Elijah and the widow, we begin to build the trust that we can bring our full selves to church, to each other, to God. And we find that God, love, that power of human compassion, it has a wellspring that cannot run dry. Like the story we heard from Kings, when we give for each other, God provides until the rain comes. There's no need to shortchange it with cheap grace. Only deep hospitality and trust in each other. By the way, my son was right. He totally broke his ankle. It threw a wrench into all of our summer plans. But 3 casts later, some reorganizing of our lives, we got through it. And when he gets hurt, like the other day when he said he still had that splinter from 3 days ago in his foot, I'm more likely to believe him, even if I really want to be in denial. I see you. I believe you. Amen.